My name is Sophia, 36, and I've been married to Alexei for 9 years. My relationship with my mother-in-law, Natalia, a strict, successful businesswoman known for judging everyone, has always been strained. I'm completely bankrupt, Natalia's voice echoed during the monthly family dinner in their grand dining room. The silence was deafening. Sophia looked around the table. Disbelief and worry were reflected on the faces of her 3 brothers-in-law and their wives. Alexei pressed her hand under the table. "What do you mean bankrupt, Mom?" Ivan, the eldest brother-in-law, asked, setting down his wine glass. Sophia's eyes shone with worry, tension, and quiet, powerful curiosity. Victoria, a 65-year-old woman who usually exuded power and control, said, "The bank is about to seize the mansion. My investments, everything, are bankrupt, but how is that possible?" Roberto's wife, Anna, interrupted. "Your companies. Consistently bad investments." Victoria interrupted, running a hand through her well-kept hair. "I trusted the wrong people. I have to sell the mansion immediately." The dining room suddenly felt small and stuffy. I felt the tension rising. "Sorry, Mom," my second brother-in-law, Carlos, said. "But we just bought a new apartment. We just don't have the space." "We're doing renovations," his wife, Patricia, added quickly, avoiding eye contact. "My house is too small," Eduardo, the youngest of the brothers, said softly, while his wife, Maria, nodded vigorously. I looked at Victoria. Something in her expression unsettled me. In 7 years of marriage to Miguel, I had learned to read his subtle gestures, the way his fingers tapped on the table, that strange glint in his eyes. "Can you live with us?" The words slipped out of my mouth before I could stop them. "We have a spare room, Carmen." Miguel looked at me in surprise. I don't blame him. Our house was modest compared to his siblings, and I was never Victoria's favorite. Furthermore, I felt everyone's attention was on me. I even had some savings. Not much, but maybe they could help pay off an important debt. Victoria stared at me, her expression unreadable. "Would you do that for me?" "Of course, your family." The silence that followed was broken by my in-laws' protests. "You can't do that. That's crazy. Just think about it." But I persisted. The next week, I prepared the paperwork to transfer my savings and arranged for Victoria to live in. The day I signed the transfer documents, Victoria moved into our house with Mila. This time, her smile was different. "Dear Carmen, I think it's time to explain a few things." But before I could say anything further, the door slammed open. My brothers-in-law rushed in, their faces red with anger. "Mom," Roberto yelled, "you can't be serious. Are you going to tell him everything?" Victoria stood slowly, her posture firm again. In the grand Moscow dining room, Natalia said, "Everyone sit down. It's time to tell the truth about this little test." Sophia's heart stopped for a moment. Natalia's smile, unlike any she'd ever seen before, shone. "You've proven, Sophia, that you understand the true meaning of family." The envelope in her hand suddenly felt heavy, intense. Sophia realized this moment would change everything. Her eyes shone with surprise, pride, and a quiet, heavy determination. Victoria sat in the main chair in our simple living room, looking more impressive than ever. The contrast between her designer suit and our simple furniture had never been so stark. Her firm, clear voice began, "I built my empire from the ground up. But you don't know that before I met your father, I too came from a humble background." Roberto tried to interrupt, but Victoria silenced him with a look. 6 months ago, I received a disturbing medical diagnosis. She paused, startled. It turned out to be a false positive, but it made me think about my legacy. To whom should I leave everything I've built? She pulled several documents from a manila envelope, so I devised a test that will reveal the true worth of all of you.
It was all a lie.
Ivan's voice trembled with anger. "A test," Natalia corrected. The results were shocking. She scattered documents across the coffee table, photos, emails, texts. "Ivan," she glared at her eldest son, You thought I was a pauper, selling company secrets to competitors. Ivan's face turned ashen. His wife, Anya, stepped away. Sergei, Natalia turned to the middle son. You had the mansion appraised, buying it cheap and selling it for 3 times the price. Marina cried in a whisper. Natalia turned to the youngest, Nikolai. You and Maria initiated the process to declare me mentally incompetent and gain control of my companies. My husband, Miguel, was in the society. How could you do that? But it doesn't end there, Victoria said, pulling out more documents. I investigated your personal finances while you were planning to take advantage of my supposed misfortune. All 3 brothers turned pale. Roberto has been embezzling company funds for years. Carlos has mortgaged his house 3 times to pay off gambling debts. And Eduardo, Victoria sighed. You've been selling confidential information to our competitors for months. The room erupted in shouts and accusations. Patricia was crying bitterly. It was all a misunderstanding, and Anna was just looking at her husband with disgust. Shut up. Victoria's voice resonated through the air like a whip. Everyone immediately fell silent. Now, Carmen, she said softly, turning to me. You are the only one who offered help honestly, without any ulterior motives or hidden agendas. You were even willing to sacrifice your personal savings. She took a new document from the envelope. This is my new will, signed and notarized this morning. Carmen will be the primary heir to all my companies and assets. The silence that followed was deafening. What? Roberto jumped up. You can't do that. We're your children. That's what I expected more from you, Victoria replied coldly. Carmen has demonstrated more integrity and family values than all of you. But she knows nothing about business, Carlos protested. She's just an elementary school teacher. Victoria smiled. A teacher who's been studying business administration at night for the past 3 years. Isn't that right, Carmen? All eyes turned to me. I had been taking night classes, though I hadn't told anyone except Miguel. How did you know? I asked softly. I've seen you more than you know, Victoria replied. I've seen your excellent grades, your dedication, your work ethic. While my children were living off my money, you were quietly making your way. He got up and walked to the window, his image radiating in the evening light. Starting tomorrow, Carmen will take over the day-to-day operations of all my companies. I'll oversee this transition for the next 6 months. And we? Eduardo asked. Victoria turned, her face even more stern than before. You're all dismissed from the company. You'll have to find work elsewhere, if possible. So I'll send a detailed report of your illegal activities to every company in the region. The shouts and protests erupted again, but this time Victoria ignored them. She came over to me and put a hand on my shoulder. Are you ready for this, Carmen? I looked at Miguel, who smiled proudly at me and nodded slightly. Yes, I replied, feeling a mixture of fear and determination. I'm ready, Victoria said, because this is just the beginning. Roberto threatened at a tense family meeting. We'll sue. We'll challenge the will. Victoria simply smiled. Go ahead. All documents proving your illegal activities will be presented as evidence in court. This calmed them down for a while, but their sabotage attempts didn't stop. One morning, I arrived at the main office to find that someone had deleted all the important files from the server. Roberto thought he had me beat, but I didn't show him the backups I regularly made every night. A teacher always comes prepared, I told him as security guards escorted him out of the building. Carlos adopted a different tactic. He started spreading rumors among the staff about my lack of experience. The tension in the office was palpable until I implemented an employee benefits program that Victoria had been avoiding for years. Come on, Victoria said during a staff meeting. Natalia said, the true value of a company lies in its people, and it takes a lesson to understand that. Nikolai, the most stubborn, tried to bribe the board against them. I recorded everything you said, Natalia revealed, her plan thwarted. I've learned from the best teachers, Natalia told Sophia, watching Nikolai leave. My brother-in-law's wives weren't far behind. Anna tried to organize a boycott among major customers, But the attempt failed when I announced a new line of organic products that doubled our sales. Patricia tried to leak confidential information to the press, but she discovered I was feeding her false information to prevent the leak. Maria was the only one who came forward to apologize. "I'm sorry, Carmen. We let greed blind us." I forgave her, but kept my distance. As Victoria taught me in business, trust once lost is hard to regain. Miguel supported me unconditionally throughout the process. "I always knew you were special," he said to me one night while I was reviewing reports at our home. "That's why I fell in love with you." 6 months later, the turnaround was complete. The business was performing better than ever. I implemented new social responsibility policies. I expanded international operations and increased profits by 40%. Victoria was overjoyed. "This has exceeded all my expectations," she told me during our monthly dinner. "Now it's just a tradition between the two of us." "I had a great teacher," I replied with a smile. "Do you know why I chose you?" she asked, pouring herself a glass of wine. "It wasn't just because of your honesty or your intelligence. It was because I saw in you what I saw in myself 40 years ago, a hunger for knowledge and a desire to do things the right way." My brothers-in-law eventually gave up and moved to other cities. Roberto found work at a small company where he earned a third of his previous salary. Carlos had to sell his house to pay off his debts. Eduardo had to work at a competing company, but in a much junior position. A year after the lawsuit, I threw a party at Victoria's house, which is now also my main office. I invited all the employees and their families. "Why are you doing this?" Victoria asked, watching the children play in the garden and their parents enjoy a buffet. "Because a company isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet," I replied. "It's a family, and unlike some people, I know how to take care of my family." Victoria nodded in agreement. "You've learned very well." "Do you know what's most ironic?" I said, looking at the happy employees. "Your children were right about one thing. I'm just a teacher, so I know that real power isn't in controlling people, but in helping them grow." Today, 2 years later, the company's value has tripled. Although we now have an office in the mansion, Victoria is officially retired, though we still meet weekly for dinner and to discuss strategy. Last week, I received a letter from Maria. Apparently, Eduardo wants to reconcile. I smiled when I read it. "What are you going to do?" When I told Victoria, I replied, "Give them a chance, but let them earn it." Victoria smiled proudly. "Sure," she said, "you're my best investment." And so, that humble teacher, once despised by her in-laws, became the leader the company needed. Not because he yearned for power or money, but because he understood that true wealth lies in treating people with dignity and respect. As I always tell my employees, sometimes the best business lessons are learned in the classroom. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to the channel.
See you next time.